This webinar has been convened as an early opportunity to communicate the data and information work that's being funded by MARCO, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Oceans, to support Mid-Atlantic Regional Ocean Planning. And I'd like to note that this is, as I said, it's an early opportunity. The contract work that you're going to hear about for the next hour is just getting underway right now. And there will be a more extensive opportunity to engage with and learn about the progress of this work during a day-long workshop that will be held on September 22nd in Norfolk, Virginia. You'll be hearing more information about that will be available as the plans come together. MARCO will also be hosting this workshop, and it's going to take place the day before the next Mid-Atlantic Regional Planning Body meeting that will be happening also in Norfolk on September 23rd and 24th. So stay tuned for more information about that. But for now, this hour is being convened to give you an opportunity to hear brief overviews of scopes of work under 3 new contracts that have been led by MARCO. And we'll follow those brief presentations with questions and time for Q&A. So let me do, and so just to be clear, even though we've gotten a late start because of the technical difficulties, we will still plan to have this webinar run for an hour so that we don't do short shrift to any of the presentations and offer as much time as we can for questions. Let me say just a few things about the mechanics for the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and a summary will be, along with the recording, a summary will be prepared and posted on the MARCO website, as will the slides from today, a participant list, and a log of the questions that have been posed. You can pose your questions through the chat function of the webinar, and we'll be monitoring those questions as they come in and posing them to the appropriate presenter or member of the MARCO leadership or co-chairs of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Planning Body work groups, many of whom are with us in the room here today. Let's see. Anything else? Any other mechanics that I need to mention? Can we just dive right in? All right, let me tell you who you're going to hear from, and then I'm just going to hand it over to the presenters. First, we're going to hear from Pat Halpin with the MDAT team, and he's going to talk about the ecological data synthesis work. Then we'll hear from Kelly Nee and Peter Zakowski with the RPS C-Plan team. They are going to be conducting the human use data synthesis work and give you an overview of that. And then finally, we'll hear from Peter Taylor and Emily Chinchinia, who are going to be conducting the regional ocean assessment work, and they will provide an overview of that work. And then we'll open it up for Q&A after that. All right, so with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Pat Halpin.
All right, I'm Pat Halpin. I direct the Marine Geospatial Ecology Lab at Duke University, and I'm leading what we call the MDAT team, the Marine Life Data Analysis team. I want to quickly go through talking about our project. We are one of the 3 new projects here for the Mid-Atlantic, but we actually have a long history for more than a year now developing data originally from the Northeast and now extending it, so we have a lot of results to show. And I want to talk about the scope of the work and some of the timeline and next steps. So this is just looking at our team and our organization chart. We bring together the InGet lab, the Marine InGel lab at Duke, but also 2 labs at NOAA, the NOAA INCOS lab that's handling seabirds, and the NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center that's handling fish. We provide a single point of contact for this team, and we're very interested in getting stakeholder interaction at this level. And so this is allowing us to have a point, and we enjoy having public webinars, things to be able to show the progress of the work going ahead and to receive more input. The team is basically focused on looking at marine taxa, So we have taxa specialists on avian and seabirds, marine mammals and sea turtles, and fish. We are also extending the work right now to incorporate benthic habitat data as well. The project started out originally focused on the Northeast RPV, and so we were looking originally at the Northeast region, but developing data actually for most of the Atlantic seaboard. So this gave us an opportunity within the last year to try to extend the work to cover the Mid-Atlantic region as well. And I think this is going to work out really, really in favor for the Mid-Atlantic, because as an end result, we're going to have seamless marine life data across those regions. And I think that's going to be very, very powerful as an end result. We've been using a framework to think about the development of marine life data. And so there's a pyramid that was being used to try to explain this hierarchy. At the bottom of the pyramid are the individual species. So here we're looking at species data and model products, looking at individual species or groups of species. And then farther up the pyramid are thinking about more synthesis products and single species where you might have hotspots or core areas for species. And then even farther up would be synthesis products that would combine multiple groups of species together in habitats as well. So this kind of gives us a philosophical framework to think about on how we're building things from raw data up to things that are more abstract and synthesis products. And that's really the focus of the work going forward, is really going to be looking more at the single species and multi-species synthesis products. So we have 5 tasks in our work plan right now. One is to finish developing the regional marine life database and the web services to provide that to the MARCO portal. The models that we're developing generally follow a fairly, hopefully straightforward process where we aggregate data together. So we're aggregating together lots of aerial survey and shipboard surveys. This is looking specifically here at cetaceans. With fish, it's going to be trawl surveys. With seabirds, it could be a lot of ship and shore surveys as well. We fuse that data with oceanographic and physiographic data to try to get the environmental conditions with the observations. We build statistical models to be able to extrapolate that data into full coverage for the region, and then produce GIS model products. And these can be the abundance data layers, but then also the core areas and other kinds of synthesis products we're going to be describing today. We will just skip this one. This is just going to show an animation of the data development. If you had seen that, it would have shown 20 years worth of data being assembled. It's exciting. Okay. The kinds of products that we just wanted to show a few examples from each of the taxa to give you a flavor of the products that we're developing. And so this is an example for humpback whales. And the example is looking at winter versus summer seasons. The colored GIS map underneath is showing the predicted abundance of the species, and the black dots on the map are the actual observations, showing how the data is developed. One reason we wanted to show these pairs is to show that a lot of the species in the regions are migratory species, so there's a lot of variation between seasons. So the annual map will not do a good representation of showing you the full distribution, and so it's really important to be able to look at seasonal maps to show you when and where the animals occur. The second map, as an example, is showing the highly endangered North Atlantic right whale. Here it's just looking at the summer season models and showing them mainly in their feeding grounds. One thing I did want to note here is that the abundance models, the density models, are predicting fairly close to the exact count of right whales. So this is something where we're getting fairly good precision on these. It varies depending on the amount of data that we have and the robustness of each of the models. For seabirds, the NOAA INCOS lab is producing similar types of models, and I'm just going to show 3 examples of some of the seabirds. This is looking at the roseate tern, and you can see spring, summer, fall, and then winter seasons. And one point to note is that some of the migratory species, we may not have data for all 4 seasons. It could be that they're not found, or it could be that the data is too sparse. So we may not have models to cover every season for every species. This is looking at long-tailed duck abundance. Here is looking at surf stoater abundance. There have been working groups working with the INDAT team for each of the three taxa, and the working groups have been looking at defining what were the key species to cover and how to define the seasons and much of the technical development to date. Each of the taxa working groups has met at least 3 times, 3 different meetings, and have more than 80 external experts reviewing the models to date. On the fish side, this is data from the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, and they're collaborating with us on the development of the fish products. Here's looking at one example for Atlantic cod. The fish data products we're producing, instead of producing environmental abundance models, what they're doing is sticking a little closer to the original data and just interpolating the biomass that they're finding for each species from the fall trawl surveys. So here's showing the Atlantic cod with the original biomass from the surveys, and then a log biomass and an interpolated biomass from the trawl surveys. I was going to show a movie for this. I'll skip that one as well. This is looking at Atlantic herring, a very important forage fish in the region. Also looking at interpolating the data from the surveys. Finally, the last example here is looking at squid. Show another example of longfin squid biomass from the trawl surveys. And this is looking at a composite. This is an example of putting together multiple species as forage fish to try to create a synthetic product that is looking at important forage fish, more of an ecosystem type of indicator. So I wanted to give a flavor for the types of data products that are being developed across the entire region. This is actually amounting to quite a bit of data because we have multiple species and multiple seasons, and then also putting together products that deal with the error and uncertainty with each model. We've put together more than 3,600 GIS layers already, and there's more in store. So it's a lot of raw information to be developed and to be consumed and interpreted by the RPD. So one question is how we're going to deliver this data, and so we're going to be delivering this data through Internet Web Services, which will allow us to send the data more automatically to the Marco portal as well as other Internet website portals. The benefits of that is that it's going to provide the data where the portals aren't going to need to store it all, and it's also going to provide updates automatically, so if anything's updated, it will be updated to all the end users simultaneously. So this is just a schematic of the process for delivering the data. So the seabird data, the marine mammal data, the fish data are going to be staged at a central database and then sent out to portals. In addition to the regional portal for Marco, there'll be also the NROC portal for the Northeast, and then the national NOAA Marine Cadastre portal will be looking at some of the data layers as well. So the web services will be feeding similar data to multiple portals. Under this new contract, we are also going to be adding in benthic data layers, and we're in discussions right now on what will be the most comprehensive and most appropriate benthic data layers to be able to produce to add into the process to supplement the seabird, marine mammal, and fish data. One of the products we're producing in addition to the abundance forecasts are going to be uncertainty products. I don't have time to go into the details on these, but for every model prediction, there's going to be a series of maps that are produced that show the uncertainty and potential error, because every model is going to be different depending on the amount of data that's provided. So that's the raw data. That was the base of the pyramid. One layer up in the pyramid is looking at how do we develop this into core species, core areas, and hotspots. And so one way to think about this is to think about how would you take a continuous map of the predicted abundance for species and decide a threshold of what's the core area for usage for that species. So you could look at a map like this and say, well, it looks like those warm-colored areas are the hotspots. Maybe that would be the core area. But there's a lot of different ways to set thresholds. And so, for example, I'm just showing here 3 different GIS maps that are using 3 different accepted algorithms or methods to bin things into areas. And I'm just showing this to show that there's a lot of variations on how you can do this. All of them are correct. It's just depending on how you approach the data. So this is a very, very key and important issue on how do we take this data and synthesize it into more useful products. To delve into this a little more closely, if we looked at North Atlantic right whale, if you were to ask someone to bin the North Atlantic right whale into 5 categories, maybe low density, medium low density, medium high, and high, one thing people might do is say, oh, let's just divide the data up into 5 equal bins. If you did that, you'd end up with this very conservative-looking map that shows 2 hotspots for North Atlantic right whales in the month of March. But if we used a different approach that looked at unequal bins, that allowed you to subdivide the lower end, the sparser data, a little more closely, we could find that there actually are, in the month of March, right whales that might still be migrating up the coast, and there could be important data that may be missed if you use the first approach. So this is the kind of thing that we're working with regulatory agencies and end users and stakeholders for coming up with better ideas of how you want to bin this data. So this is a critical step that we're going into right now. In addition, there's other methods for looking at how you might synthesize the data. One way to think about this is, are there different levels of abundance? So if you have species maps showing the whole species, the distribution of the species, what you may want to do is to define where would you capture all of the species. So this is a map covering 99% of humpback whales. This is one of 98%, 90%, 75%, and 50%. And the idea here is that we have algorithms we can use to try to say, we set a threshold, could you find the most compact core area that captures that amount of abundance of that species? So this is a tool that Marco and the Mid-Atlantic RPB could use to try to develop hotspot or core areas for species. So this is just one alternative approach. Another approach is to look at optimization to say where are the core areas for each individual species, picking the sweet spot, the threshold that makes sense for that species. So not instead of picking 50% abundance for all species, picking an abundance that makes the most sense, the most efficient one for each species separately. And so in this case here, we're showing that there's a different point for North Atlantic right whale than the optimum point for humpback whales. And so this is another alternative we're exploring right now that is a little more elegant way to solve this problem. So finally, the upper part of the pyramid is to look at multiple species. How do you combine multiple species together? So not one species at a time, but multiple groups of species. So here, using cetaceans as an example, we could say, well, what if we wanted to look at a functional group of all the baleen whales or all the toothed whales? Can we aggregate the data together and start to come out with core areas for different groups? So one way to do this is to look at species richness. Where are the places that you would get the most different numbers of species? So here's an example of taking multiple species abundances and then overlaying them together and then being able to pick at different abundance levels, where do we have the most overlap in species? And so this is an important way to be able to find out with multiple species, where would be the multi-species hotspots. One final one with this is how to look at diversity of species. So one is the count of species. This is looking at the diversity and evenness of this distribution. And so here's looking at a common ecological diversity index called Shannon Index, looking at the diversity of species together. One thing to note here, the map I'm showing is showing the whole Atlantic seaboard. If we subdivided this for the Mid-Atlantic region, the intensity of diversity would change. And so we're going to be developing map products that are going to be for the Atlantic seaboard, for a northern region from Virginia to Maine, and then finally for the Mid-Atlantic region on its own. And the priorities are going to change depending on what the map extent is. So finally, just to end, we have a very aggressive timeline where we are going to be working with federal agencies this month, a number of webinar meetings to look at setting thresholds, trying to come up with commonality on what are accepted ways to create these core areas and hotspots. We're going to be preparing for the September meetings you heard about, We're going to be preparing for future RPV meetings and getting these products and web services developed. So it's a very aggressive timeline to get this all prepared before December. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pat. So let's keep going on to our next presentation. And Kelly, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kelly Nee. I'm from RPS ASA. And I'm serving on this project as Senior Advisor for GIS and Data Management. The project manager is Melanie Schroeder from ASA, and we're also joined with Violet from CPAN. So our overall project goal is to develop high-quality, human-use geospatial data products that can be used to support ocean planning. Those products will be highlighting areas of high intensity and also multiple human uses. Additionally, we see a very strong need for effective management and coordination between the various entities in the region, including the RPV working groups, stakeholders, MARCO, the project steering committee, the ROA team, and the MDAT team. And we also hope to be able to capitalize on crossover between similar work going on in the Northeast region of the Northeast RPV, so that we can capitalize on any data products that may span both regions. So our team is comprised of RPS ASA, CPAN, and 3 subject matter experts. As I said, the project manager is Melanie Schroeder-Giron from RPS ASA, and she'll be leading 2 efforts under this project. One is coordination with stakeholders in the IJC, which will be led by CPAN, and then the other is spatial data compilation and synthesis. CPAN will be leading the spatial data compilation piece of that, and RPS ASA will be leading the spatial data synthesis. Our 3 subject matter experts are Dr. Linwood Pendleton from Duke. Dr. Pendleton will be helping us with the synthesis of socioeconomic data products. We also have Dr. Teresa Godecki from NOAA, and she'll be helping us think about the recreation data products, and she's in particular an expert on how recreation data is collected and the survey techniques used to collect that data. And finally, we have Evan Matthews from the Quanta Development Corporation, and he'll be providing a maritime industry perspective that we feel will be particularly helpful when we're thinking about the maritime commerce data. So a quick overview of our tasks. There are 4 main tasks, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on each of these in subsequent slides. But they include project coordination, so again, that's talking to entities in the region, stakeholders, and making sure that we're coordinated with related efforts. And in particular, making sure that the data sets that we use, just the synthesis methods that we're using, and our final products are fully vetted by all these interested parties. The second task is the compilation and development of the data. So that's creating a prioritization matrix in order to vet data products, or data inputs, I should say, and then coming up with a data inventory that we'll be using to support the product. The third task is actually synthesizing the individual data sets into human use maps. And then we'll be rolling up individual data sets into component level synthesized products, and then rolling the component level products up into synthesized products that represent multiple components. And finally, we'll be developing a final report with all of the details about our process and a series of fact sheets which provide a much more simple overview of what our products, how our products should be. Moving a little closer to the mic. I feel like I'm yelling, but so this next slide shows the coordination piece of this project. And so essentially, it's hard to fit all the different entities and stakeholders that we need to coordinate with on a single slide. This is our best attempt at it. It gives you a sense that we need to coordinate with a lot of different regional planning authorities. There are a lot of stakeholders, and the coordination effort is really, we see that as key to our success in this project. And we plan on working closely with the project steering committee to define the most effective ways to coordinate and engage with all these different entities.
This is Peter Zaikowski with CPlan. I'm going to talk just a minute about the task of data compilation and development. We've designed...
Yeah, come sit right here.
Sure. Just moving closer to the mic. The data compilation and development task, we've designed the methods to really support the later tasks of synthesizing the data. A key component of this task is developing a shared understanding of data prioritization criteria. On the slide, you can see an example of what the criteria framework might look like. This was developed based on work already completed by the Marco Data Portal team and has some examples of how we might further develop their criteria for spatial data quality. So we'll be drawing from a number of sources for these data. Here you can see a list that is not exhaustive, but are some of the data sets that have already been identified by Marco as priority data. These include existing and upcoming Marco portal data, other currently existing data sets that we will be reviewing and vetting, as well as updates to existing portal data and customized or hybrid products. And so in addition to the data prioritization criteria, we have some other deliverables that include a summary of the vetted spatial data inventory, databases that contain all the individual GIS data layers and metadata needed for the data synthesis, an inventory of the non-spatial, narrative, or tabular socioeconomic and ecological data for use in the regional ocean assessment, documentation of any of the data gaps, and a summary of identified potential future human use data.
So using the data inventory developed by CPLAN, the RPS ASA team will begin developing the synthesized maps for this effort. And our first step in that effort is going to be to categorize all the different data sets into typology. Once we've done that, we'll be normalizing the data sets onto a common scale. So essentially massaging them so that they can be aggregated. They'll be regridded at a resolution decided upon by the entire project team and planning steering committee to make sure that all the data sets are at the same spatial resolution. From there, we'll start aggregating the products. So essentially, we'll be creating component-level synthesized products. Once we have the high-quality component-level synthesized products that we're happy with, we'll start thinking about how we can combine those component-level products into a synthesized product that represents human use more generally. It really starts to get at where the high intensity and multiple use areas are. And finally, once we have that sort of super aggregated product, if necessary, we'll be reclassifying the values of that grid in order to make it more easily interpretable. So this is just an example of a topology table that we made using some of the data sets that are already available on the Marco Data Portal. And so this is how we might be categorizing some of the data. And this next example shows how we might be developing some synthesized maps. This is just an example. And so in this case, we've taken two different categories of data, recreation and maritime commerce, with 4 individual data sets for each category. We've combined those 4 individual data sets into a component-level product, one for recreation and one for maritime commerce. We've block transformed those component-level data sets to reduce the effects of outliers, rescaled them so we can allow direct comparison between the maritime commerce and the recreation data, and then combine those into a cumulative intensity map. And at the very end, reclassify them onto a different scale to make that final product more easily interpretable. For the final report and fact sheets, we'll be summarizing in the final report all of the more details of exactly what we did, including the prioritization criteria that we used, a summary of all the input data sets, any data gaps that we found, and finally the methods and that we used to create the data products and a summary of those products themselves. For those people that do not want to read a long report, we're going to be coming up with a fact sheet for each product. And these are going to be much more user-friendly documents that really clearly communicate the caveats of each data product, the selection method, how to interpret the products, and any classification that we may have applied at the very end. The project schedule is also pretty aggressive for this effort. Project coordination will be happening throughout the project. We hope to finish up the data collection by September, so that we can finish up the synthesized maps by November, and our final report and fact sheet in December. And that's all I had.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move now to the regional ocean assessment, and Peter Taylor, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. I'm Peter Taylor from Waterview Consulting. I am working on the Mid-Atlantic Regional Ocean Assessment with Marco, and we're just getting started with this effort, so I'll be providing, along with Emily Cheney, an overview of what we'll be doing.
Peter, you need to speak up.
Okay. First, quickly, a little bit about us. We both specialize in translating science information into communication products, information that's useful for ocean and coastal management, policy, conservation. And we both are involved in the Northeast Regional Ocean Council's efforts in the Northeast region, and that work informs and also complements the work we'll be doing here. So very broadly, what the purpose of the Regional Ocean Assessment is to help inform regional ocean planning. One of the recommendations of the National Ocean Council in 2010 was to develop a regional assessment for each of the regions. And the RPB, Mid-Atlantic RPB, and Marco are moving ahead with this. The goal is to characterize the ocean environment and human activities in the region. We'll be bringing together the best, most useful information on those. There's a large array of topics that we'll be including, but the priorities will be the topics that the RPB and Marco have already identified as focal areas for this. And one key part of this project too is to develop a report from this this work that is useful, engaging, attractive, and accessible to anyone. We'll be doing a web-based report and really doing some interesting, creative, innovative work in how to bring together vast quantities of information, distill it down, and then provide it in a way that is useful to support regional ocean planning. And Emily will talk a little bit about the information gathering parts. Oh, I should mention too that in terms of our roles, I'm the project manager. I'm the lead for the planning and development of the communications products. And Emily is the lead for the information gathering and data gathering, and we sort of overlap in the content development part of it.
Thanks, Peter. Basically, our job here is to gather and integrate and distill some of the best available information that's already out there on the Mid-Atlantic Ocean, and we're going to be leveraging a lot of the work on the two projects you just heard about, the ecological synthesis and the human use synthesis, but also incorporating other sources of information out there on the biological, chemical, ecological, physical, cultural, economic, and historical conditions of the ocean. And the key is to transfer all of that into something that's accessible to a wide audience. So this is just a short list of some of the example data sets that we'll be looking at, and the ROA product will essentially constitute a status and trends update and report on many of these data sources. A little bit about the process. Like I said, we're going to really leverage the ongoing projects in the Mid-Atlantic already, the ecological and human use synthesis projects, but we're going to be looking at a lot of spatial data, reports, scientific literature, economic analyses, and contacting subject matter experts in all of these topics to really consume as much data and integrate as much data as possible into this assessment and make a large and integrated product that can really be turned into useful information for decision making, the RPB and the public to visit to get a one-stop update and one-stop sense for what is going on, what are the issues that matter in the Mid-Atlantic, and what is their status. Like I said, some of our objectives will be to highlight some of the knowledge in the Mid-Atlantic that's already known, but also the data gaps that exist and where we might need to focus research efforts in the future or data gathering efforts in the future. We hope to highlight relationships and linkages among ecosystem features and human uses, and perhaps suggest appropriate scales of interpretation and analysis for the decision-making that will need to happen for ocean planning goals. Importantly, by doing a status and trends report, we hope to jumpstart new synthetic data products that could be developed in the future, metrics that the RPB and MARCO could consider to track progress in the Mid-Atlantic Ocean as ecosystem changes, as human uses change, and human needs change.
So looking at the project timeline, again, it's on a similar timeline to the other two projects. Over the summer, we are working at the details of what this assessment will be, what information will be contained. We're working on gathering the information data. By September, we will have we'll have completed the initial research and have an outline and a concept for the final product. Then in the fall, we'll be developing drafts of the product and releasing it on the web in January. And through all of this, we'll be interacting with the other two contract teams that you just heard from and identifying how information from their work can feed into this and also how our work might be useful to them as well. And there'll also be opportunities for input and feedback as we develop the website as well. And I should mention too, the website will be integrated in some form into the data portal and or the Mid-Atlantic, the MARCO website. So we'll work out the best way to make that accessible from those two avenues. And so this just summarizes very quickly again what we'll be producing. And one of the real focus areas for us is to make this something that is not just a technical report, but something that is really dynamic, interesting, and a good quick reference on, as Emily mentioned, the status, trends, and to the extent that we can include it, information on the health or status of the ecosystem and human uses. And it'll be, again, comprehensive, but distilled. So we'll be covering wide, but a little bit thinner than the other two projects. The other two projects are diving deep into their areas, and we're trying to, in part, pull out and do the higher level of synthesis for the region. That's it.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to all the presenters. As you can tell, there is a lot of exciting work that is either underway or being launched right now. And for the next few minutes, and we'll plan to go to just about 5 after if the questions are continuing to come in, and hear from folks who have joined us through this webinar to see what kind of questions you have for the group. And Megan, I'm going to turn it over to you to pose the questions and direct it to the right person or people.
Great. We've received a few questions so far. So I'll start with a couple questions for Pat from Matt Bill regarding the ecological synthesis. The first is, can you define what a core area is? And the second is, can you provide a little more information on who is on the working groups for the various texts?
Okay, two really good questions. The first question, we were actually trying to show that we're investigating multiple methods for defining what a core area is, because there are multiple potential descriptions of what that would be. So I showed one method that was looking at selecting abundance and threshold of abundance. Another one that was looking for the abundance accumulation curves. And those methods are looking, if you're answering the question based on areas of high abundance of the species, it's a core area for the species. We I didn't have time to put in another whole approach, which is using expert opinion to select areas that define parts of animals' life histories. And there are data layers that we have for biologically important areas that we just published this spring, that for at least for the cetacean species, that are done by expert working groups that have defined polygons, that are indicating places that are important to the life history of a species, whether or not it's an important feeding ground, or it's a nursery area for some species, or a breeding area, things like that. And so there's very different approaches to doing this. So we're right now trying to work with groups on saying which definitions do you want to use, and which kinds of thresholds to use. The working groups, for the second question, are taxonomic experts. There were calls for experts last year, and I don't have the list directly in front of me. Yes, Emily's going to chime in on this. This is good.
So because of the nature of the work, a lot of the work group interaction has happened through the Northeast Regional Ocean Planning effort, and you can actually find a list of all the work group participants' agendas and materials for all of the meetings that they've had, as well as the work plans for all of these base level MDAT products on neoceanplanning.org, and just navigate to the project area and find Marine Life product, the Marine Life project. And you should find PDFs of all of that good stuff there, archived for your use.
Okay. Great, thanks. Question for Kelly now. How will the human use data synthesis data sets be vetted?
That's actually probably more sequence. They're looking at the data criteria, but they'll be looking at various indicators of data quality and all that security.
Sure. So part of the vetting process is going to be reaching out to stakeholders and trying to understand how well the data that we have matches what people in those industries or areas think or know that the data should look like. So there's that portion of it, and then the prioritization criteria apply to evaluating essentially all of the data sets we're compiling to understand which ones are going to be the most useful in compiling results.
A question for Laura McKay from Grantee Domenico. Is the ROA project the same or related to the RFP from Marco announced on April 16th of this year, and how is it funded?
Yes, it is the same. Yeah, we have the RFP on the Marco website, and this resulting contract that you heard about from Peter and Emily is that, the result of that RFP. And it is funded with Marco funds received from the Moore Foundation.
Question for Peter and Emily from Matt Gove. There was a comment that reflected the preference not to label oil and gas information in the ROA as a sustainable use. Do you plan to do that, or can you comment on how you'll categorize oil and gas information in the ROA?
We are just getting started on this, so I would want to comment on that now.
A separate question for you all. Will any physical oceanography data layers be included?
Yes, that is definitely part of the ROA.
Another question for Laura McKay from Alley Chase. Will there be opportunities to comment on the products as they are being developed? Can you hold webinars over the summer and fall to update us on the work of the ecological and human use data synthesis product?
Yes, as Laura Hanschel mentioned, I think that was marked before the webinar, the September 22nd workshop that Marco was hosting in advance of the RPT meeting on the 23rd and 24th in Norfolk, Virginia, will be a great opportunity for folks to see draft example products from each contract. So that would be a good opportunity for input. But I don't believe we'll have any other webinars scheduled over the summer, but we encourage everyone to get in touch with us if you have thoughts and ideas. But the next webinar will be September 22nd.
Great. Just a follow-up on that from Noah Chesney in a comment. that these will be important tools to help members of the public visualize and understand the important ecological and human uses offshore. A question for Pat from T. Gill. Is the NOAA Environmental Sensitivity Index shoreline data included in this assessment?
The IMDAT team was looking at offshore marine life. So we were looking at seabirds, marine mammals, sea turtles, and fish. And we are adding in benthic habitats for the region at this point. We were not looking at shoreline data in this particular assessment. I'm certain that that can be added in at some point in the process, but that wasn't one of the tasks that
There was a request from Allie Chase for an additional clarity on oil and gas. It was hard to hear you, Peter, and I'm not sure if anyone from Marco would also like to weigh in.
Yeah, I just said that we're just getting started on this, so I wouldn't want to comment now on how anything's going to be categorized.
And I'll just add that oil and gas is a difficult issue for our region. The region is split by BOEM. So from, and I'll ask Mary Bogan to correct me if I'm wrong, but New York, for instance, New York and New Jersey are in a different BOEM region from the rest of the region. And Virginia being, I think, the only state at the moment is interested in offshore oil and gas, makes it a tough issue to put before the whole region. And also the planning is down the road a bit, so it hasn't been a very immediate topic of conversation. But obviously it's out there, and I'm sure down the road the RPB particularly is going to have to grapple with this issue.
There are no more questions at this time. I would invite anyone who has any final questions on the webinar to submit them now via your chat function. Otherwise, I think that we will adjourn. And you'll note on your screen that if there's any questions that you have at a later date or anything you wanted to follow up on, you can always contact the Mid-Atlantic RPB at that website, at that email address, as well as there's an email address to contact Marco. I'm not seeing any additional questions or comments come in, so I think that we can go ahead and wrap up.
Okay. Well, let me just build on what Megan just said. We really appreciate you taking time to join us to hear about this exciting work. A couple of reminders. Reminder number one, the recording of this webinar, a summary, and other materials will be posted on the Marco website. Reminder number two is, as Laura McKay just mentioned, and I have also mentioned, there will be a workshop hosted by Marco that's going to happen on September 22nd. That will be the day before the RPD meeting in Norfolk, and that will be an excellent opportunity to hear about the progress being made that you've heard about today and to engage with the people who are doing that work. This is really important work, and it will contribute greatly to the Mid-Atlantic Ocean planning process. The timeline is intense, as you've heard from all three of the project teams, but so are the needs that this work is going to address. And your input is important and appreciated. And I know that Marco will continue to look for opportunities to engage you. Go, send emails to the two addresses that are posted on the slide there. You've heard from the teams about how they're intending to engage and incorporate input into their work as it moves along. This is a collective exercise, and your role is an important part of the process. So stay tuned for more details about the September 22nd event, and wish the project teams good luck with all that they have before them, and I think we will adjourn. Thanks.